The Indiana Pacers are a team that has made a rapid ascension to becoming a noteworthy NBA team. Most people won't consider them legitimate contenders this year, but they are certainly in the cusp of being a locked-in playoff team and a team that is, without a doubt, a threat and a team that you don't really want to play in the playoffs. First and foremost, this has to be headed by the main guy that has helped accelerate this rebuilding process, and Tyrese Haliburton. He's the guy that made a magnificent jump last season and became one of the premier guards in the entire NBA, an NBA All-Star, and a guy that was able to be a part of one of the greatest USA teams ever established. Now, he didn't get to play a lot of minutes with Team USA, but let me make this point clear. For young guys, being able to be around greatness is one of the greatest things a young player can experience. And so, although Haliburton did not get extensive minutes in the postseason or with Team USA, did not get extensive minutes with Team USA, what Haliburton did get was being able to surround himself with some of the great minds and talents that the game of basketball has ever seen. And I have a good feeling that's going to reflect very positively on this upcoming season and his growth as a player. We saw some flashes of when he was able to get some minutes there with Team USA, but there's a legitimate chance that Haliburton makes another massive jump this season. Because not only is he a premier player already, but what he grew from and what he was able to attain and learn from in the Olympics, but also the way that this team has really been built around him now. So let's get into the rest of this roster that I'm very excited about, because you have another guy that they paired up with Haliburton to form a dynamic duo of sense and have another all-star, and that's Pascal Siakam. We saw him because he was essentially a trade deadline acquiration of him at the deadline, and so they only got limited reps with each other. There wasn't a lot of chemistry that was able to be built last season, but what's exciting is now you have another whole entire offseason of growth between Haliburton and Siakam. And I can assure people that that is going to be noticeable this season. When you have an offseason of growing chemistry and you can go through an entire year together, chemistry is going to continue to grow. And so you're going to see those two establish themselves as a really good dynamic duo in the NBA this year. But it's not just with Siakam, because then you head down to his front court mate and Miles Turner. He's a guy that for many, many years people thought as a guy that could be traded or dealt away. And he has now established himself as a core piece of this team and has remained a Pacer for a very, very long time. He's going to be, once again, one of the premier rim protectors, a great lob threat, and a very, very under-the-radar center, quite frankly. And so between Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam, you really have built a very solid front court for them. Now, there's two other guys I really want to address that I'm excited about in the Pacers, because you could go a couple different ways with the way the starting lineup is going to look. When I look at the starting five, here's who I think is going to be starting alongside Haliburton, Siakam, and Turner, who are the three locks. Ben Mathurin, and I also think you're going to see Nembhard being a guy that's going to take that jump and he's starting for them. Why do you think I say that? Well, Mathurin, I think, is a little bit more clear. He was injured for the second half of last season, which we have to remember, because Ben Mathurin is a guy that has had an incredible start to his career so far. Injuries derailed it last season, and they were missing a legitimate starting player for the team. You have to recall that. But here's the thing that was really exciting for me when I looked at it. Andrew Nembhard had a much expanded role last season. When it came time to the playoffs, injuries built up, and we saw him take a massive jump. And that inspired me to say, you know what? I like what I saw there. If he can be even a shell of what that was, because then you're going to have to apply the other starters back into there and establish certain roles, he can be a legitimate starting shooting guard alongside Haliburton and form a very, very good backcourt out there in Indiana. I like what Andrew Nembhard's capable of bringing to this team, and I think if you have the starting five of Haliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Mathurin, Siakam, and Turner, that's going to be a very, very nice, solid starting five for them. But I said there's going to be other options as well. The one thing I would say is that six man is already locked. TJ McConnell is going to be the sixth man. He is one of the premier backup point guards in the entire NBA. He's a guy that anybody can count on. He will show up no matter what role you give to him, and he's a great locker room guy. He's going to be the sixth man for them. And then you look at the bench pieces, though, and here's why I said there's going to be some questions. You could start Nesmith. He has been a foundational guy, not a guy that you can go count on to go get unlimited buckets or whatever, but he plays his role perfectly. And so if you want to go make Mathurin or Nembhard a six-man and truly let them be the best six-man in the NBA potentially, then you could go start Nesmith, who's been starting over the past couple of seasons, and let him continue to fill that void and fill that hole for them out there in Indiana. So that's something you're going to look at for in terms of rotational aspects. Then you go to backup power forward. Obi Toppin's a lock for them there. He's been a reliable guy, had a breakout season last year. We finally got to see Obi get minutes. I love what I saw out there from Obi, And I think him getting that opportunity now to really excel with the bench unit is going to be huge for him in year 2 out there in Indianapolis. Then you go to the backup center spot, and this is a position spot that isn't as strong. It might be more so of a weakness, if you want to call it that, because you have Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman. I like Isaiah Jackson. Not sure if I can consider him a legitimate backup center, though. And Wiseman's a guy who's obviously been disappointing throughout his career. What do I expect from him? There's not much. It's obviously very limited in terms of that. We don't know. Could he have a breakout season? Sure. We've been saying that for many years. So there's not much I can really address in terms of Wiseman. But Isaiah Jackson, I do like him a lot. He's capable of it. But I don't know if they have a legitimate guy that if Turner were to get hurt or just spill minutes for whatever the case may be, that I would trust to run center. But then we go back up to power forward, and there's a guy that I am intrigued in. And that's Jarace Walker, a guy that was a top 10 pick just a year ago. And he was something I'm very, very high on. Whenever he's gotten an opportunity to get minutes, he's also shown flashes that he's more than capable of playing at the NBA level and at a high level in the NBA. And so what makes me really question and wonder here now is where's the opportunity for Jarace Walker? Personally, I could see this turn out to be a situation where we see him get dealt eventually in what could be a trade to acquire another star for the Pacers. Because Siakam's a lock now. He's going to be a core piece. And Obi Toppin's the perfect backup player. And so I don't know where minutes are going to come for Jarace Walker. However, if he gets opportunity, they have extreme depth, and he's something you can certainly count on. And then you also have James Johnson, who's not going to be a guy that's going to play a lot of minutes, but he's essentially the bodyguard for the Stars. He's going to be the bodyguard for Tyrese Haliburton. He's the guy that you're going to have to keep on that roster as a great locker room presence and a guy that's going to help keep the locker room in check. Then we go back up to another draft pick they just made this past year in Johnny Furphy, who I do like him a lot as well. He could be a guy that shoots the ball at a high clip. He's going to be able to be relied upon. I don't know if that's going to be something to count on him this season. It's more so, let him play in the G League this year, let him develop, and eventually we'll see him play in the rotation, next season or the following year. Then you also have Kendall Brown, who is on a partial guaranteed deal. I'm going to address him in a second, but he's a guy that's going to be heading to year 3, and he's a guy that hasn't shown a lot of flashes yet. He was a good player in college. Injuries have kind of hindered his career a little bit, but that's who you have in Kendall Brown. Here's the last guy that's currently on a guaranteed contract on the Pacers, and that's Ben Shepherd. Ben Shepherd is the guy that I also am quite high on in terms of his rotational aspect, what he can bring to the Pacers. He's not somebody that's going to be a legitimate superstar player or starter to any extent. Not even sure if he's going to be a locked-in starter, but he can be a 3-and-D option. He can shoot the ball. He's a lot more consistent, I'd say, and I trust him more so than I would trust Furphy at this point in time. But Ben Shepherd is the guy that I do like, and I think we're going to see him get an even larger expanded role. Possibly even, there is a chance, and we saw some flashes of it last year, that he could eventually take over the spot and become the backup or even the starting small forward. Like I said, if you want to move Nembhard or Mather into a 6-man and he takes over Nesmith's role. Not saying that's likely. I'm not going to favor that at this point in time, but that's certainly on the table, and I would not be against that at all. So that's what you guys currently have built out there in Indianapolis. I said just a few moments ago, the one part I'm really looking at, that is going to be a training camp battle when I see this roster. I said Kendall Brown, he's on a partial guarantee. There's one spot they essentially have 15 guys on guaranteed to any extent contracts right now. Kendall Brown would be the 15th man if I look at it right now in my eyes. And there's a guy that's signed to a non-guaranteed deal in Cole Swider. Just brought him in a couple weeks ago. I like what he brings to the table. He was with the Lakers originally, and then he transitioned over to Miami last year, and there were some good flashes. I really like what I saw from him. He's a guy that you could trust to go in and play the small forward or power forward and be a stretch forward for them. Not the best defensive player, but can be a guy that you can count on and go shoot the ball. Not going to be even a guy you're going to consider being in the rotation consistently, but being that third string depth piece, I like him. I count on him. I would trust him more so than I would trust Kendall Brown at this point in his career. From a health standpoint, veteran experience, also what he brings to the table. And so you could get off of the Kendall Brown contract quite easily. Only a partial guarantee right there. That's something to definitely keep an eye on, because I do think, and I would not be shocked to see Swider take that spot from Kendall Brown, or at least go into the two-way spots, where I'm going to address right now, and possibly have one of the 3 two-way guys get promoted to a standard contract, replacing Kendall Brown, and letting Swider then become a two-way contract player on the Pacers. Now, for those two-way spots I just hinted at, Enrique Freeman, a second-round draft pick this year. You have Quentin Jackson, Tristan Newton, also a draft pick this year. All 3 of those guys are guys that are solid additions to this team. I'm not sure any of those guys are guys I'd say will get promoted to the standard roster or standard contract this season. Enrique Freeman's a guy that can rebound at a very high clip. If you need him to go in there, possibly be that guy that becomes a center for them. Possible. Not sure on that yet. Quinn Jackson, I do like him a lot, though. Very explosive player. Can score when you let him get down in transition. He's shown flashes last year with the Pacers, but also with the Bulls and Wizards and his other stints in the NBA. Tristan Newton, he's got a winning DNA established within him. He's won at a high clip at UConn. He's won throughout his entire career. I like Tristan Newton as a good draft pick. That's who makes up the two-way spots for the Pacers this year. So ultimately, this roster has been established now. The Pacers are a team that when I look at, like I said, I don't want to consider them legitimate contenders right now. I don't have them favored to win the championship, but by every means necessary, they are a team that I could see make a position and make a threat in the Eastern Conference this year. You're not going to want to play this team. They have talent, but I see them more so slotting in towards the 4 or 5, maybe even 6 seed in the Eastern Conference this year. However, there is a path for them to become legitimate contenders. I alluded to the fact of Jarris Walker. Also, I just listed a lot of young guys that have talent, have shown flashes, and do have value within the NBA. And you have 2 legitimate all-stars in Halliburton and Siakam. I understand that a lot of guys aren't going to just be drawn to go play for the Pacers, but if a guy becomes available that you can trade for and acquire that is a legitimate all-star, that is a move that I would very, very like to see, because you have the pieces to acquire him between Jarris Walker and the young pieces, and that would make them take the jump to be a legitimate contender in the NBA. However, they could also have guys make the jump in Nembhard or Mathurin that become all-stars too. Not ruling that out at all as well, because I do like what those 2 guys bring to the table. Very, very high in Nembhard, as I discussed. So those are things to keep an eye on. I do like to see one other aspect for them that is a little bit easier to replace. They do need more guard depth to become a legitimate contender as well, because right now you only have 2 guys that I count as legitimate backup point guards, or legitimate point guards on the roster. Behind Halliburton, you only have McConnell. Yes, Nembhard can go spill minutes and become a backup as well, but preferably I like to have at the point guard spot 3 guys. And if one of those guys go down, then you're in a lot of trouble. So if they can go acquire, I'm not saying anybody special. This is just a simple signing in free agency. Go pick up a guy. You have Markelle Fultz currently available in free agency. You have a couple other guys that are at the point guard spot in which you could identify and say, hey, here's the process. You're not being signed right now for one reason or another. You are a veteran. Here's our contract we can give you. Play this role. Try to earn yourself a spot on our team, and we go from there. So that's the only other thing I really want to address for the Pacers, because ultimately this is a team that's going to be in the playoffs. I like what they're building out there. Lots of guys to keep an eye on for potential jumps this upcoming season. And ultimately, though, this is a roster to keep an eye on, because like I said, I think Halliburton has a chance for a big jump. Nembhard could make that big jump, and this is a good team to keep an eye on this upcoming NBA season.